Welcome back to the second video in the Intro to R Basics. Today, or it's the same day actually, but in this video, we're going to be talking about, let's write a comment because we're trying to build good habits here, working with vectors. I mentioned that in R, we can have a bunch of different types of objects, and today we're going to be focusing on vectors. How do we create vectors in R? We're basically going to use two different functions. There are multiple ways, but we're just going to focus on these two. So we have the C function, which is short for concatenate, and the seq function, which is short for sequence. First, I'm going to focus on the C function, and then we're going to look at the sequence function and look at some operations with vectors. Now, with the concatenate, all we have to do is, like I said earlier, name our vector. We're going to name this one my vector. And when we're using the concatenate, we're going to put the values of the vector that we want in there, the elements of our vector, and we separate them with a comma. So say for this one, we want the values -1, 0, and 3. When I run this, and we'll see it pop up in our environment in RStudio, we see that my vector now contains the elements -1, 0, and 3. We don't only need to put numbers in here either. So if you remember, the value x, which we also see in our environment, or the object x, has a value of 1. So if we have my second vector, and we say we want 0, 0, and x, we see that in the environment, we have my second vector is 0, 0, 1. Okay, that being said, we can also concatenate vectors as well. So if we want to put my vector and my second vector together into one vector, we can have the concatenated vector is going to be, we're using that C function again. And remember, we need to separate the different objects or values by a comma. So the first one is going to be my vector. And the second one is going to be my second vector. And a fun tip, just to make coding faster, is if you ever see the name of an object or the name of a function pop up like this underneath, you can just press tab and it automatically fills in for you. So when we run this, we now have the concatenated vector is just my vector and my second vector put together into one vector. So that is the C function. If we're looking at seq, which is short for sequence, as you probably have guessed, this is how we create sequences of numbers. Now, maybe here I don't really remember how to use the sequence function. So I'm going to use my handy question mark with the function that I'm interested in learning more about. And I run that. And it shows up in the help window. So we have a description, we have the usage, and specifically, I'm going to look here. So if I want a sequence that goes from a number to another number, I can also specify by how much I want to jump to that second value. So to make that make sense a little more, we're going to do an example. where we are going to create a sequence of numbers going from 0 to 10, going up by 2s. The way that we do that is we have our sequence function. We're going from 0 to 10, and we're going up by 2. So it does show up in our environment, but say I want to display it in the console, all I have to do is write the name of my object and run that. And it shows up in the console down here. We have a sequence of numbers going from 0 to 10 that goes up by 2. Now, if you notice, whenever we run any sort of vector, so we can see it a little bit in our environment, but we notice it more down here in our console, when we have a list of numbers, we always have this number 1 in square brackets at the beginning. This is just indicating the position of the first number in that row. So if we have multiple rows, so if we have multiple rows, like creating a sequence from 1 to 100, we see that we have these different numbers that are indicating what index that first number in the row is. That being said, R is a little different from other programming languages, such as C, for instance, where the index starts at 0. In R, the index starts at 1. So the first number in a vector, in any sort of list or anything, that is going to have the position or the index of 1. Now, say we want to extract the 57th element of our sequence. Because this is going from 1 to 100, we know that value is going to be the number 57, but say it wasn't, and we just want to know, hey, what is the 57th value of our element, or of our vector? We would write our vector, name, and we use the square brackets to extract a value from the vector, and whatever position we want. So the 57th element in our vector or our sequence going from 1 to 100 is simply 57. And just like before, inside these square brackets, that does not have to be a number. We can also name a value, say we set a equal to 12, and then we want to know what is the sequence from 1 to 100, the 12th element of, or the 8th element of that. And we run that and we see that it is 12. Now, in terms of vector operations, we can add vectors together. So if we have my vector plus my second vector, all that happens is each number, each corresponding element of each vector is added together. If we multiply the vectors together, each corresponding value of each of the vectors is multiplied together. So we can also just add, so if we have my underscore vector and we add 3 to this, whoops, then 3 is added to each element of your vector. So when it comes to vector operations, we can do the exact same things as we can do with values. But uh, remember, if we have two vectors or multiple vectors that we're working with, we're just looking at the first element of one and the first element of the other. The operation is going to happen with those two. And then the second are going to pair up, the third are going to pair up, and so on. If we are just adding or multiplying, dividing, subtracting one number to a vector, then that number will be implemented to each element in the vector, like we had here. That is the end of this video. And in the next video, we're going to talk about data frames.